he sued when I won the election, so I learned a lot about election law then. And then I had a litigious election in 2006.
Do you think that your education, like when you studied law, did you focus on election law at that point?
No, they didn't even have it as a class.
That's what I'm saying, because most people don't say I'm an elections lawyer. Most people don't say or practice that. So how did that come to be?
Well, my opponent sued when I beat him, and I learned a lot. I was represented by an excellent attorney named Michael Teen, learned a lot. Mm-hmm. And then in 2006, they tried to come after me. And first they filed this doctor who didn't really want to campaign, so they needed someone else. They filed this woman who was a member of a community council, which is the elected zoning board for unincorporated areas. And they realized that with the doctor still there and this woman, they weren't going to beat me. So they go and they recruit a distant cousin of mine who had a bone to pick with my father for some reason or another, but they get my second cousin in the race with a similar name to mine.
Oh my God, so just to take away from you.
We sued to kick him off the ballot, and we sued to kick the community council member off the ballot because she had not resigned. So we developed a strategy, and I hired a lawyer who ended up being a mentor to me, a lawyer by the name of, oh my God.
But it sounds like you have a hater. Like, it sounds like you've always had just a thorn in...
I ran against an incumbent, and the incumbents normally, when they lose, they want to go after.
Is this a normal practice in politics where these kind of tactics are used?
No, Miami-Dade has always been. There's always been some bad actors.
It's always been controversial in Dade, to be specific.
Yes. So Ron Meyer, who's the attorney from Tallahassee, represented me, and I learned a lot from him. And when I got termed out of the legislature, other people started calling me. Hey, listen, I have an elections issue. Can you help me? And
because of the experience you had.
I had an election practice.
Just because of how many people were also going through another, not similar circumstance,
but
were in the same kind of...
I think another issue is you also saw a lot of the regulatory agencies getting more involved.
Regulatory agencies, people might not know what that is. So it's like an organization.
The Florida Ethics Commission, the Florida
group of people,
the Florida Elections
oversee.
Commission. Yes, and what had happened is we had toughened the lobbyist laws, and right after I left, they changed the structure for political committees to try to prevent people from using what was then known as committees of continuous existence as slush funds. They were using those committees to
continuous existence
go out to
means
dinner,
like regardless
travel.
of time they.
So they changed the political committee laws. They ended up being tougher on financial disclosure statements. And I always like to say, if you pulled my financial disclosure forms from my 8 years in the legislature, they were all wrong. They are all done improperly. I am lucky I never got a complaint. And it's one of those things, there's an old saying, you teach best what you most need to learn. And, I started looking at the disclosure laws, the ethics laws, and, I realized what it is that people can do. So a lot of what I do is advise candidates on how to properly do financial disclosure forms, how to properly fill out their forms so they don't have issues.
Just move the right way, because at the end of the day, there's so much more scrutiny in trying to become an elected official versus other things.
And rightfully so. I mean, this is something that, this is a public trust. And one of the things I've advised local elected officials on is how to comply with the Sunshine Law, how to make sure that you're not speaking to your colleagues unlawfully behind the scenes, how to make sure that you're keeping up with, openness laws, with the true nature of the Sunshine Law, which was created by Ruben Askew.
Tell us about that Sunshine Law. What does that do, or what is it?
Listen, so what happened is in the 70s, we have a lot of scandals involving the legislature, and Governor Ruben Askew comes in and says, we're going to fix this. The Sunshine Law is two parts. Number one, the financial disclosure side.
So letting people know what you're spending money on.
Well, no, what your financial interests are. Because if you're voting on things that could be a conflict of interest, the public has a right to know.
Could you give us an example of maybe?
Sure. Let me give you a local elected official. Let's say that person has all of his money in Wells Fargo. And Wells Fargo wants to open a new branch in his neighborhood. That's a potential conflict of interest because they own they
Shares of
keep
his
his money,
money.
and they want to, they want to open a branch and has to be zoned. Let's say that somebody owns, a great deal of Apple stock, and the public school system is about to do a technology investment, and they're deciding whether to go the PC route or the Apple route.
So they obviously an Apple,
Exactly.
and then his own.
And this is why these financial disclosures are so important, because it shows what conflicts of interest could be. So I work with members on that. The other issue is members have to keep up with public records laws. Nowadays, when the Sunshine Law was written, nobody had a cell phone.
In the 70s.
And then when the cell phones, there were bricks.
Yeah, you could just pull this information out anywhere.
These laws were written during a time where the concept of text and voice messages and
Didn't
private
exist.
email servers, email didn't even exist.
Right.
So it was very easy to keep up with, public records requests in the beginning. Have you had contact from such a person? Well, these are the letters they wrote.
Yeah, exactly.
The first email servers, especially for government officials, were government email servers. I remember when I was a legislative aide back in the early 90s, you had the legislative government email, but no member had a private email. You didn't have Gmail yet.
It was
You
just like a
didn't
communal
have-
thing that everybody used?
I'm
or-
sorry?
So you had your own...
I had a government email system. So if there was a public records request, it was only the government server. So
it was
now,
all in-house.
yes. So now in the age of smartphones, politicians have private emails. They have their own cell phone text messages. And when there's a public records request, a lot of public officials don't realize, even though it's your phone, even though it's your private email, even if it's your Gmail, Hotmail, whatever account,
Right.
or @me account if you're a Mac user, if you do anything that involves your government position on that, that's discoverable
And
in
that's
a
liable.
public records
So you're
request.
liable for that.
Well, they have to give it up.
Exactly.
And part of the problem that we're seeing is
So anything's fair game. Any communication that
it
you
has
can
to
you
be.
do.
But that's the nature
That's the point,
of
that it
openness.
has to be.
So we see a lot of administrators, a lot of municipal attorneys that don't know how to rein in their elected officials. And the ones that I advise, and I'll give you an example. I was private counsel to Philip Levine when he was candidate and then mayor of Miami Beach. And, I was always on his butt. I'm like, if you get a request for this, if you text with your private email, that's public. You need to turn that over
Yeah,
immediately.
wow.
And I work with my clients to make sure that I tell people, if you want to be 100% above board, if you want someone to keep you 100% transparent so you never get in trouble, hire me and I will keep you that way. If you're looking for a lawyer who wants to hide things, I'm not your guy. Look for there's other great attorneys.
So
here.
just the public versus private just relationship that elected officials have versus other people is just completely different.
Listen, one of the things I noticed, and people ask me, will I ever run for office again? I don't know if I ever will. I certainly did not like giving up my privacy. But when you run for office, you're giving up your privacy, and rightfully so, because if you're going to be responsible for so many things, we need you to be as transparent as possible.
On all different aspects of your
On
life.
everything.
So what happens to the people that say that personal doesn't matter in professional?
It's first of all, the Supreme Court has said that personal emails on your work server are non-discoverable. But
Personal emails on your
work server.
So if I email my mom from my job, that's a no-go? I'm just trying
that's
to...
yes, they don't have a right to get those.
Okay.
But there is a scrutiny place. You have a burden to show that these are personal.
So you still have to turn them over and be like,
yes.
look, this is personal.
I mean, listen,
Okay.
I think the biggest crime that Hillary Clinton committed had to do with the fact that she wiped emails off without the scrutiny, without verification.
Like willingly knowing that.
She was saying, oh, no, these were my yoga classes, this was this.
But we don't know.
We don't know. You have to, there has to be a filter to do that. And I say this critical of Hillary, with the knowledge that very publicly I am anti-Trump. I just think that we have to hold everybody
Accountable regardless of party affiliation or...
Absolutely. And just because Hillary committed crimes doesn't mean that the country should have taken that bad step on going to someone like Trump, who I think is dangerous. But
Okay, so...